Morning, everyone. So on Labour Social today, we're actually going to talk about Labour. That'll make a nice change. Basically, we're into election year. Even though in theory the election could be January 2025, it won't be. Even the Tories aren't suggesting that it will be. Rishi Sunak has said this is definitely election year. It's just a case of whether it's spring or autumn. And so they've been setting out their stall. Keir Starmer is going to be giving a speech today. Obviously, I only know a few details of what's going to be in it, but the Tories have been pushing a particular line this week, which is attacking Labour's £28 billion green investment. And Labour have also been pushing a particular policy this week, which actually sounds really like, okay, stick it in the manifesto, sure, why not? But, is it really the thing to lead with? And it's actually, if you think about it, yes, it is. So the policy in question is legislating for a specific offence of defrauding the public purse with a sentence of up to 10 years. Now, on the face of it, like I say, you go, okay, yeah, it could go along with that policy. That'd be good, especially in light of, for example, all the COVID-related fraud that's been going on. But we know there's been a high level of defrauding of the public purse been going on for some time. So yes, why not? Other countries have a specific offence for this. The United States, there is an offence for defrauding the public purse in the United States, but there isn't one in the UK. Why would that be? So, but you think to yourself, but is this really the policy to like shout from the rooftops? Yes, I'm going to go through. I found 9 reasons. I wrote 9 reasons down. So let's go over them. So first of all, I will just say in terms of why it's important to pick and choose your policies really carefully. Not when I say policies, I don't mean the ones that you're going to implement in government. I mean the ones you're going to shout about. Because when you're trying to get through to voters, the main route is through mainstream media. And you've only got so much bandwidth. There's only so many policies you can really focus on through the mainstream media. So you need to pick the ones that are the most efficient for you in terms of attracting votes. So let's go over the various advantages. First of all, it costs no money. It's legislation, which means they can do it really quickly. When Labour come to power, their first year in government is basically going to be legislative agenda. They can't do anything in terms of tax and spend, really, because they're going to inherit the Tory budget. It will be a good year before they can issue their own full budget. And also, the Tories are pushing this tax and spend attack line. So if Labour can talk about things that actually don't require loads of money, all to the better. Second, Labour don't have to convince the public that this is a good policy. They don't actually have to promote the policy to the public, because the public will already think it's a good idea. You imagine asking the average person on the street, do you think there should be a specific criminal offence for defrauding the public purse like other countries do? Who's going to say no to that other than a rich Tory scrounger that actually likes to defraud the public purse? So the public are already going to be on board with it. Third, it allows Labour to highlight that the Tories could be legislating for this themselves. And you'd think, well, after all the fraud that's been going on, particularly related to PPE, COVID PPE and furlough, there's actually way more fraud than that, but the public know about that. So you'd think, well, why aren't the Tories legislating for this? So that allows you to put the seed in the public's mind. Well, why are the Tories not doing this then? Because it'd be easy. It's just a piece of legislation, dead easy. Fourth, it allows Labour to mention the ways in which the public purse is being defrauded under the Tories' watch. Fifth, it allows them to mention the sums of money involved in these frauds. Because, you think about it, you've got like over £10 billion of COVID and furlough fraud on its own. The Tories are going on about Labour's spending plans. But if Labour can say, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean any more spending if we can cut out the fraud. If Labour can start to mention the vast sums of money involved in defrauding the public purse, which runs to a lot of money, more than enough to swallow up the cost of that green investment. Labour can say, if we can cut out this fraud, then we suddenly have a lot more money to spend, don't we? Sixth, it allows Labour to keep reminding people that Sunak has written off all of this fraud. The The PPE fraud, technically the government are chasing Michelle Mone and Doug Barrowman, but that's it. That's like £100 million worth of fraud, maybe, out of 4.5 billion or something. Why isn't the rest been chased down? So no, Sunak's written off the rest of that fraud, and he's written off all of the furlough fraud. So Labour can say, well, hang on a minute, why are they doing this? Tories can't be trusted to look after public money, because you know, when it's defrauded, when public money is defrauded, they just shrug their shoulders and go, oh dear, how sad, never mind. 7th, law and order policy. Oh, 10-year sentence. Oh, that's really good. They like that. Oh, tough sentences. Yes, that's the way to deal with the country. So whenever Labour want to win power, they always have to muscle in on the Tories' like usual territory. Law and order is the obvious one to do it on. The 10-year sentence thing is performative. It's like up to 10 years, whatever. It doesn't matter, does it? The important thing is that there will be a specific offence. But the sentence appeals to voters. Oh, tough sentences. That's the way to deal with these rich Tory scroungers. 8th, it allows Labour to, in fact, I'll just come to a comment because I'm just about to come on to that. 31 Blairs makes a clear difference between Labour and the Tories too, indeed. So my 8th one is it allows Labour to undermine one of the Tories' main attempts to paint all politicians the same. Like, trust in politics is at a record low, absolutely record low. And if you, like me, observe a lot of Tory shills either in the mainstream media or on social media for the last ever back to Boris Johnson, for the last 2 years, there's been a consistent attack line coming out. You can't trust Labour. Keir Starmer's dishonest. You can't trust Labour. Keir Starmer's dishonest. It's all the time. I see it on social media all the time. I see it from in the opinion pieces in the Telegraph and the Times all the time, and the Daily Mail and the Express. It's there all the time. Can't trust Labour. Keir Starmer dishonest. Now, why are they doing that? Why are they pushing that so much? It's because they know the public consider the Conservatives to be dishonest and untrustworthy. And they know they can't change that. They know there's absolutely zero chance of changing that. So what they're seeking to do is to get people to believe that Labour are just as bad. That way, it nullifies the disadvantage for the Tories. So that's why they're pushing that. This undermines it, because a policy like this is Starmer saying, not all politicians are as bad as each other, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to legislate. So he can also mention the plan to prevent MPs from taking up lobbying jobs, and for ex-ministers not to be able to take up lobbying jobs for a certain amount of time after leaving their post, which is now up in the air. It was going to be 5 years. Now Labour are having cold feet about that. Just have to go to a super chat. We had Paul Ewan. Thank you very much. £4.99 super chat. Says, good morning, Graham and Phil. Enjoy a pint of cheap plonk on me. I may have to have that later. There's names for people that drink cheap plonk in the morning. But thank you. 9th, my last one before I go through some of the other comments, is Labour can point to how long. So if you go back to the Mone-Barrowman case, that has been going on now for at least 2 years, 2 years that I know of. I saw it first reported January 2022. So it's been going on for at least 2 years. That's a hell of a long time to investigate one case of fraud out of a big mountain. So Labour can point at the fact that maybe the criminal investigation is taking so long because there isn't currently a specific offence of defrauding the public purse. So the National Crime Agency are having to work with more general laws instead of this specific one. Whereas if there was a specific law, it would not only send a message to people who might intend to defraud the public purse that there's potentially a 10-year sentence waiting for them in prison, but it makes it quicker and easier for the authorities to investigate. So that will also save public resources as well. You know, so although it sounds like a really simple policy, it's actually very clever on so many levels, so many advantages to it. It's already in alignment with what the public wants. So it's Labour basically saying, we're going to deliver. This is what you want. You are appalled at the state of politics. Politics is really grubby, sleazy, self-serving. We're going to legislate to prevent that. So it's on side with the public immediately. It allows lots of easy attack lines against the Tories, very easy attack lines. And it draws that distinction between Labour and the Conservatives. Brian said, I bet my pension that Mounds House and Yacht are registered to an offshore holding and can't be touched by the authorities. Well, we already know these things. In fact, there was a situation that cropped up earlier last year now. I had to get used to the fact we're in a new year. So Dan Needle, who's a tax lawyer, and I sort of follow him, I think he's got something interesting to say this week on something else. But anyway, if you're on Twitter, he's worth following. He was the one who pissed off Nadeem Zahawi by really going to town about his tax affairs now the summer before. Zahawi threatened him with lawyers and things like that, but he is a lawyer, so he sort of went, hey, no, go away, mate. But he revealed, or I saw him point out, that there's a particular home, a very expensive home, £20 million home in London that Moan and Barrowman were using, and it was registered to an offshore, company. And it turned out that they didn't register their controlling interest in that company, but apparently they have one, which would be a criminal offence. So yes, there'll be an awful lot of their assets registered to offshore companies, but more seriously, offshore companies where they may not be registering their controlling interests. So there could be more criminal offences coming, particularly Doug Barrowman's way, than just this PPE fraud. Let's have a look. I might have missed a bit of a comment here. Fascist playbook. Accuse your opponent of that which you're doing all along. Well, yeah, this was almost 100 years ago that this became quite famous. It is absolutely the case that what you do, because you've got various people observing politics. Quite a lot of people observing politics have already made their mind up. Maybe they've made their mind up critically. Maybe they haven't. Maybe they're just behaving tribally. But there's an awful lot of people who turn on to politics only when there's an election. So there's lots of people, millions of people in this country who vote. They think it's important to vote. They want to use their vote. But when there's not an election on, they're not interested. They don't care about politics. And I understand it's unpleasant, it's nasty. And for some people, it's just boring. So they only get turned on. So they don't really know what's going on. And then the election comes along and it's almost like they're a clean slate. So in order to sort of, but if the public sort of have already got used to the idea, well, I keep voting, they've voted Conservative since 2010, right? And they're thinking, I keep voting for them and I keep voting, and they know what their reasons for voting for them were, and it doesn't happen. Because, well, I keep voting Conservative for this reason, and then it doesn't happen. I can't trust them anymore. So the trust has gone with the Conservatives with enough of these key voters. So the Conservatives are trying to basically say, oh, yeah, but Labour are just as bad. It's like, oh, I understand. That's what the Tories are basically trying to say. Oh, we understand that you'd prefer it if all politicians were honest, but I'm sorry to say they're all as dishonest as each other. Labour are just as bad. It's just instead of giving all the money to billionaires, they're giving it to union leaders. That's what they'll say. And that is what they're saying. Emma said, I've just officially joined the Labour Party. Looking forward to helping the election campaign bring it on. Very good. Thank you very much. There we go. So much financial corruption, it's near impossible to go after anyone, otherwise they'll just claim victimization. Yeah, well, there's a good thing about being the government. You can tell them to stop whining. What are they going to do? The Parliament legislates. There are people, we know there are people like Moan did this, Barrowman's done this, of course, well, both of them together. Zahawi's done it. I've just talked about that. When people tried to report on what they were up to, they threatened them with lawyers, slaps. And the idea is very wealthy people will prevent public scrutiny of what they're up to by threatening very expensive civil legal action. Well, you can't do that with Parliament. You can't. You can try and take Parliament to court. You can have a judicial review, but in court, first of all, the government and Parliament have the resources to fight the case. You do not get Parliament or the government to back down because of the fear of legal costs, because it's like, yeah, we've got a lot of money. We've basically got the country's money. And the other thing is, at the end of the court case, the judge will decide on matters of law. Well, Parliament make the laws. So really, it's not possible for anyone to successfully sue the government unless the government are out of tune with Parliament. Because if the government want to do a thing and it's not legal, they'll just ask Parliament to make it legal. If Parliament, like at the moment, the government are trying to send people to Rwanda. But and there's all sorts of Tory MPs, Tory in the media going, oh, it's not judges that decide all, it's Parliament decide all. And Parliament wants them to go to Rwanda. It's like, no, Parliament doesn't want them to go to Rwanda. If Parliament wanted them to go to Rwanda, Parliament would vote to remove us from the European Convention on Human Rights. It would vote to abolish the Human Rights Act, and it would vote to disentangle us from UN refugee laws as well. Parliament has the power to do that. But do you know what? Parliament doesn't want to do that. So the government is currently out of kilter. Government is trying to claim that it speaks for Parliament, but it doesn't. Christopher say, I've never voted Conservative. The basis of their policy is always just based on wrong thinking. Labour at least have more grounded basis for their thought. Well, in a way, Labour have to. Again, when I always say, when people will say, you know, but can we trust Labour? And it's a reasonable question because, first of all, you know, Labour, the Conservatives, it's not a person. That the people who decide what Labour and the Conservatives are different all the time. In theory, the next time the Conservatives come to power, they could be led by a group of MPs who are honest. They might be genuinely just right-wing economists, and they may say, look, these are our policies, and they may present a manifesto that's completely honest. They won't. And the reason they won't, and Labour will, is because the media allow the Conservatives to get away with breaking manifesto promises. So the media will uncritically present Conservative policies at election time. And then when the Tories break them, the media will then say, oh, actually, they tried to do this, but this happened and this happened, and it's totally not their fault and no one else could have done any different. That does not happen with Labour. So the reason why you can trust Labour is not because they are fundamentally more trustworthy people. It is, although I would say they are for other reasons, but that doesn't matter. It's because they have to. The media will not cover for them. In fact, the media will attack them for things they do well. You know, in 2010, they lost the election. You know, I'd still say they ran a bad campaign. And there was, you know, the infighting that's going on with the Tories. There was a bit of that on a way smaller scale going on in Labour as well. But it was still damaging. And Labour basically just lost their discipline and didn't run a good campaign. But at the same time, the core of the problem was Labour being blamed for the financial crash when actually they did well. You know, Brown and Darling got international plaudits for the way they handled the financial crash in the UK. No one, the world is not praising Sunak or Johnson or anyone like that for their handling of COVID, are they? Not at all. So, you know, it's so there was a case of if that had been the Conservatives dealing with the financial crash the way Labour did, the Conservatives would have won that election because the media would have gone, oh, this is superb. Oh, this is brilliant. Oh, your standard of living is still way higher than it was in 97. It's come down a bit since 2008, but it's way higher than it was in 1997. And actually, they have laid the groundwork for in a couple of years' time for that standard of living to start going up again. Oh, they've done a fantastic job. Oh, look at the IMF. Look at these people. Look at those people all saying what a brilliant job Brown and Darling have done. That would have been all over the media. It was never there. There's a Reform UK comment here. I've probably missed something here. Tim's saying it's funny though because they're fighting back and saying if Labour are the same, then there's no reason not to vote Reform UK. It's Tory karma. Oh, so yeah. So the Tories at the moment are absolutely trapped in a situation they've no experience of. All the reason why the Conservative Party are the only main party in this country that are pro first past the post, or in Britain at least, should we say, in pro first past the post, is because the left wing or centre left vote is very split. Actually, the left wing vote all across is very split these days. And the right wing vote is not split at all. So what the Tories traditionally do is they've already got the right wing vote sewn up. Because if anyone doesn't like what they're doing, it's like, oh, what are you going to do then? Are you going to allow Labour in? Are you going to stay at home and allow Labour in? Is that what you're going to do? No, I don't think so. And all they can then focus on fighting the centre, which is where they're fighting Labour and the Lib Dems and so on. So the Tories traditionally can focus entirely on the centre ground. Not anymore. Now they've got Reform UK to deal with. You know, it's like, and they are very worried. Like you could argue they've had the same problem. They had the same problem in 2015 with UKIP. But it like cost them like 1 seat. It's like they didn't care. They won a majority. UKIP had their best ever showing in 2015, and the Tories won a majority. They actually extended their number of seats, right? 2019, Brexit Party stood down for them. If they hadn't, Tories wouldn't have won. It's that simple. But at the same time, Brexit Party did stand down for them. Whereas at this next election, they're going to have it's an election that they're not likely to win, and they're going to have the right-wing vote split as well. So it's a real problem for them. And yeah, they're having to say things like a vote for Starmer is a vote. No, a vote for Reform UK is a vote for Starmer. They're really very worried about it. The problem with that line is it's like, if you think about the types of voter that would vote, because obviously they're pitching this at people who might vote Reform UK, right? Are those people really thinking Starmer will be worse than Sunak? Because the way the Tories themselves present the situation is they're presenting Sunak as being no better than Starmer anyway, their own media outlets. So the Reform UK voter would go, oh, vote for Starmer. They'll think, well, who cares? Because they're being told they're both the same as each other. But anyway, I'll just some more super chats. So George, £2 super chat. Thank you. It says Labour need to neutralise the press. I don't think I would characterise it like that, but they do need to regulate the press. And then Gary Arnold, £2 super chat. How long will I be a YouTuber? That all depends on viewers, doesn't it? I actually quite like doing YouTube. The reason I started doing the political YouTube is because I was doing a gaming YouTube channel and then stopped playing that game competitively. So all of a sudden my source material disappeared. And at that point, I liked doing YouTube. So then I did political YouTube and it grew from there. So, yeah, so as long as it's viable, I will continue to do it. Or as long as it's viable or I have to retire. There may come a point where I sort of have to retire. Martin Jones, £10 super chat. Thank you very much. It says, just try to join the Labour campaign for electoral reform, but just like the Labour website doesn't recognise my new constituency. You may have to email them about that. Yeah, that'll be a problem. The old Labour infrastructure. Yes, a lot of constituencies are changing. Mine's changing as well. But there we go. It's what's just happened? Has it gone up? Oh no, it's a bloody ad coming up. Graham, stop with the ads. What game did I play? Well, World of Warcraft was my main one. I still do play it, but very casually now. David Falconer, 15 Hong Kong dollars. Thank you very much. Has media ever been unbiased? I mean, no, it can be objective. It can be objective. In terms of bias, the bias is always going to be there. Like something like the Times or the Telegraph or the Daily Mail, they are going to have a right-wing bias, just like the Mirror or Channel 4 have a slight left-wing. Well, the Mirror left-wing bias, Channel 4 is a slight left-wing bias. You do get bias. It would be better if it wasn't, but it is very difficult to not be biased. But it is possible to be objective. You can be biased and objective, right? What we need is for the media not to be able to tell lies that it knows are lies. You can understand, because a newspaper, for example, what does it put on the front page of its newspaper? That's an editorial decision. It's a subjective decision. And a subjective decision is always going to be influenced by your own prejudices, and everyone has them. So you can't remove bias completely. But what you can do is you can stop the media, not easily, but you can stop the media telling knowing lies. You know, for example, if the media are going to report, oh, the Tories say Labour's spending plans are going to add £2,200 to your tax bill, the media can say, but we've checked and it's a load of bollocks. Because I checked, it's a load of bollocks. I did a video the other day. It's absolute nonsense. So you know, again, it's the classic case, isn't it? It is not the job of the news media to report one person saying it's raining and the other saying it's not. It is the job of a journalist to stick their head out the window and tell the public which one is telling the truth. Labour could implement the recommendation for the Leveson inquiry better late than ever. Well, they're not going to. They may do something better. So at the moment, Labour's position is that they're not going to block. So at the moment, the Tories are planning on removing what few Leveson recommendations were implemented. Labour have said they won't block that. It's not that they'll support it, but they won't block it. They've also said they're not going to bother with Leveson 2. Now, what I have said for a while is Leveson was 10 years ago. It should be updated. Social media particularly has grown a great deal. So in actual fact, I would be more in support of having a completely new inquiry with new recommendations and implement those, right? It may well be. Now, we don't know. And again, this comes down to this issue of trust. But I would look at it like this. The mainstream media, as it currently stands in its unregulated form, or largely unregulated form, is a problem for Labour. Labour would be strategically mad to allow the mainstream media to continue like this. Why would they? It's not good for the country and it's not good for them. So it may well be that Labour are talking down Leveson because, you know, not to speak the horses ahead of the election, but in power can say, oh yeah, no, Leveson, it's out of date. We need an up-to-date regulatory framework. So they may well do something like up-to-date for it. I hope so anyway. Can I do a video on the banking crisis now? Labour dealt with it. This way it can be shared. Right. So the simple answer to that would be no, but I will explain. It's too late. You know, it doesn't really matter. People aren't all that. Although it would be useful if people could see that Labour actually didn't make a mess of things, it almost doesn't matter because the people in charge of Labour now are not the same people. You're not asking for Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling's passed away recently. So you're not asking for those same people to be put in charge of the economy. You're asking for Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, who had no inputs during the banking crisis at all. So it doesn't actually help. What would help is a focus on what the Tories have done in power, what they're still going to carry on doing, and what Labour are proposing. So again, people will focus on the sort of here and now. Tories could hold a press event in a telephone box and there'd still be room. Maybe. Reform UK got packed out yesterday. Their big conference got packed out, press conference. Oh, you're actually commenting on Starmer's speech now. Yes. Well, it will be packed out because, of course, people want to hear. He's going to set out. It'll not just be that they want to hear the policies they're going to go with. They want to get some inkling of what Labour's election strategy is going to be. We know what the Tory election strategy is going to be. We don't yet know what Labour's is going to be. But yes, okay. So Starmer is actually starting his speech quite soon, if not already. Although ironically, Rishi Sunak did have an input on the banking crisis. Well, sort of, yes. He was a beneficiary. He was one of the banker. There was a group of bankers who actually triggered the banking crisis in this country, and Rishi Sunak was one of them, directly involved. Now, arguably, had he not been involved, it would still have happened because he was not the leader of that group. He was just part of it. He was like the getaway driver type thing in a criminal syndicate. But nonetheless, he was directly involved. What about waste treating issues around vested interests in private medical companies? Yeah, I absolutely agree that there would want to be, if you want to really clean up politics, then you have to, it's not enough to get ministers to declare their interest. That doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. You need to stop them having those financial interests. So I 100% agree with that. If you really want to clean up politics, you have to prevent ministers from having, not just saying you've got to declare interest. You cannot have conflicts of interest. Must not have them. Divest yourself of any financial interest. And I don't think that's too much. I don't think there's an argument for, oh, but what about some ministers will just have lots of investments? Do you know what? Again, if I'm going to have to say anything good about David Cameron, this will be twice in 1 week. David Cameron actually got rid of all of his financial interests when he became prime minister, didn't he? He actually said, you know what? The easiest way to deal with this is I'll just divest myself of them. So he didn't have any. So that's, and I see nothing wrong with that. It's like, oh, you're mega rich and you don't want to give up all your investments. Yeah, don't be in our government then. I don't think members of the government should have these interests. But anyway, we'll sort of run out of time there. I'm sure you're all eager to go on and have a listen to Keir Starmer, or I don't know. We can at least see if he's got better at speeches. But thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Anyway, I do think Labour, I'm going to do a more detailed video myself on my own channel later on. I do think Labour have got a more efficient attitude to their election strategy than Tories do. The Tories start behind this year, and they're giving themselves the harder work in the strategies they're pursuing. But I will discuss that on my own channel later. But thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Thank you for the super chats. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe, of course. And until next time, I'll see you later.